All right, welcome back to the series of tutorials walking through Control Validation Compass. In today's session, I'm going to walk through the tool's threat modeling feature. The threat model page allows users to instantly build a threat model based on a unique, extensive collection of adversary TTP intelligence. In today's walkthrough, I'm going to walk through the web user interface of Control Validation Compass, but I also want to immediately point you to the Github repository containing all of the underlying adversary TTP intelligence that the UI will utilize. This is located in a different GitHub repo than the main one for Control Validation Compass. This is my personal repository, and this is just a very quick look at the data that is going to feed into the threat modeling feature. What this is a custom-built data set that I created that really kind of smashes together the MITRE ATT&CK knowledge base and a fantastic resource from the TIE CERT. These are a very large collection of adversary profiles that the TIE CERT has created, and each one of those profiles is in a very structured way mapped to victim industries and locations, as well as attacker motivations and locations. What the combined data set allows us to do is take those adversaries and just based on a quick matching algorithm based on the adversary's name, match them up with the MITRE ATT&CK data, and thus allow us to generate a large collection of adversarial behaviors from the MITRE ATT&CK database. And that's what this is all going to be relying on. So to utilize the threat model feature on Control Validation Compass, we have two options for quickly building our threat models. We can use the UI to search through the data set that I referenced earlier, or we can also look at a little bit smaller collection of what I'm calling recent intelligence. These are going to be coming from a lot of open source vendor and government advisory reports that are going to be recent kind of snapshots in time, but with collections of TTPs mapped back to specific adversaries. So let's start with what I call the Categorize Threats. When we open up this dropdown, we immediately have a number of options. What we're ultimately going to do is click on the right-hand side, one of two options. What we're seeing right now is the complete list of all of the categorized adversary profiles that are contained in this GitHub repository. And right now we have a full list of 117. If you continue scrolling down here, you'll be able to access all of the adversaries that we'll ultimately be able to choose. One quick note that I want to highlight, if you're using Mac, you can use the Command F shortcut, or if you're on Windows, you can do Control F. If you're looking for a very specific adversary that you want to see some of this threat model data around, I just recommend doing that. And it's a real quick way of navigating within this page, and you can always find exactly what you're looking for just using this kind of small workaround. But we can go ahead and select one of these adversaries and actually go ahead and automatically generate one of these threat profiles, just so you can see exactly what we're talking about. Every single one of these profiles for an individual adversary or grouping is going to contain a quick rundown. This is coming from the TIE CERT. This is just kind of an adversary profile details. It's also going to contain a MITRE ATT&CK Navigator layer file, which is a JSON object, and this is used it can be imported into the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator tool. And we're going to see a live version of that for this adversary down here. We don't have too many TTPs for this specific actor. But this format allows us to generate these nice heat maps in the Attack Navigator. And then finally, this is a custom created visual for the purposes of Control Validation Compass. For every single one of the adversaries or adversary groupings, we actually have, this is of course a modified diamond model, but this allows us to kind of visualize all of these four kind of category areas that exist for all of the adversaries contained within this collection. So scrolling back up, I just want to highlight some of the more advanced filtering options that you have using this tool. You can click any of these dropdowns to get the full list of potential criteria that we can filter this list by. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have the adversary motivations. Again, these are going to be based on the TIE CERT's categorizations of their adversary profiles. Let's just go ahead and click one of these so you can start to see what happens. When we click any of these criteria toggle options, a couple of things are going to happen. It's going to immediately filter down that full list of the adversaries. We had over 100 before. Now we just have 17 options, 17 adversaries that are known to be classified in the financial crime motivation category. Now, what was generated as well in the upper right-hand corner is an option to kind of look at a summary threat model for all of these adversaries that we're considering right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click this option. It's going to look similar, but just slightly different to the threat models we saw earlier. Scrolls us down, so we don't have, because it really wouldn't make sense since we're looking at an entire bucket of adversaries here, we don't have one of those diamond model graphics, and we also don't have a profile because those were automatically generated from the TIE cert. But what we do still have is this MITRE ATT&CK Navigator layer file, and in this case it's actually going to be far more robust. Because we're looking at a number of adversaries all at once in this view, what we're doing with Control Validation Compass is actually summarizing in total the specific MITRE ATT&CK techniques and sub-techniques associated with all of those adversaries in this view now. And you can see in the live navigator view, this is just an embedded version of the live tool. We have some much more robust coloring, and this allows us to see kind of concentrations or intensity of certain TTPs. So this is a really cool feature, and this is one of the real strong value adds in using the overall category options as opposed to individual adversaries. Scrolling down, I want to quickly highlight that all of the usual features and abilities within the Attack Navigator are still available in this embedded view. So one of the things I always like to do is do some sorting so we can very quickly and easily see, based on total count, which techniques or sub-techniques were appearing most often in this data set. Another great thing to do is you can use this with Control Validation Compass. Just open an additional tab in your browser. And if you'd like, you could go ahead and build in a different, for example, category of adversaries, load that up. If we sort in the same way, we can start to pivot back and forth between these two profiles and see how things differ amongst these categories. This is a very common thing that I do when I'm working with Attack Navigator layers, just to easily visualize differences in heat maps that I've created. All right, and then final piece for this top bucket of options for building your threat model. I do just want to highlight what happens. You do have the ability to select multiple criteria at once, which can be very helpful, but at the same time, oftentimes can almost immediately over-filter your results. So you can select any additional options that you want here. What we're going to see when I clicked this one additional option, two things happen. It dramatically reduced the list of available adversaries because this is basically a subtractive workflow. Any of the adversary profiles that we're looking at now have to be both labeled as targeting or affecting the gaming industry, as well as be specifically categorized as financial crime motivated. So only actually had two options, one option in our underlying data set, FIN5, that came back for that data. That is interesting and very useful to know, but we've really kind of narrowed down our list. And one thing I can't emphasize enough is that all of this data is, it's based on a very robust collection maintained wonderfully by the TIE cert, but this is always going to be just based on open source available reporting. And I just want to emphasize that this is a great start and looking at this data, but it's not necessarily saying that this is the only adversary that exists in the world that is known to target gaming and be financially crime motivated. It's just based on the available data. So it's always worth supplementing these results with your own research. What we did get, though, is an additional option now since we've selected two criteria. We can go ahead and look at the heat map. Again, it's going to be based on only one threat actor group, but we could look at the heat map for all gaming adversaries, for example. Okay, and then the next and last piece is going to be pretty quick, but this is just highlighting exactly what's happening with the recent intelligence feature. The end result is going to be identical to what we've been talking about here, just a nice heat map associated with recent threat. But again, what we're looking at here, a number of great recent reports that we've seen, advisories and alerts from the US CISA agency, some great deep dive reporting by organizations like DFIR Report and Sentinel-1. These are just the types of examples that I'm going to be including and continuing to add to this underlying collection here as well, on top of the higher level adversary profiles. So you can come in and check out the actual data. I've got source links to all of the underlying reports in the repository. But let's go ahead and just click into one of these so you can see it. This is a cool one that I created custom just for doing kind of some personal analysis, looking at all known stealer malware that were currently labeled as such by MITRE ATT&CK at the time. I think there were around 9 adversaries or so, or malware in this case. And we've got this nice kind of fleshed out heat map with quite a bit of data feeding into it that we can quickly drop into the tool and build this little threat model with. So that'll conclude our talk on the threat model feature. What we'll cover next is including this data for threat models and then instantly surfacing relevant detections and even things like red team tests all associated with this, so you can get a little bit more complete picture of what your overall risk profile might be.